Hello, this is Lindsay, host of The Corner Table. I am taking a break from the studio for the month of July. While I'm gone, we're going to be playing some of our favorite episodes from the past year. I will be back in August with some brand new episodes, and until then, have a great summer. Hello! Welcome to The Corner Table, a podcast about food and drink in Madison produced by the Capital Times. This week on the podcast, we're talking with Isthmus beer writer and food critic Kyle Nabilcy about his 7th annual trip to the Great Taste of the Midwest, a beer festival held every year in Madison's Olin Park. From a cucumber blonde ale called $100 Yoga Pants to imperial stouts named for Vlad the Impaler, Kyle has a range of beers to recommend. I am your host, Lindsay Christians, food writer for the Capital Times. I had a great time recording this with Kyle, and not only because he brought in a bourbon barrel cinnamon stout for us to drink while we recorded. Welcome to the studio, Kyle.
Hello.
Hi. So you spent this past weekend at the Great Taste of the Midwest with like 5,996
other people. Yeah,
yes.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about how long you've been going to the Great Taste and what is exciting to you about it. Like, why do you go every year? Why do you make an effort?
Well, it's funny. It's sort of to my enduring shame that before I started going to the Great Taste, I was like, what is the point? Like, do I have a reason to want to sit out in May and wait for tickets and, be in line at the, insane o'clock kind of requisite hour? And then do I want to be in a park for 5 hours? And I didn't get it. But around 2011, I think, maybe 2011 or 2012 was the first year that I went. And yeah, it's been like a no-brainer ever since.
And was it like a world opened up before?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, the weather was really good that first year that I went. And I was fortunate enough to be invited by a friend who was gifted tickets. So I didn't have to do any of the ticket waiting. So that might have been the best possible introduction of being able to see the fest without having to do the ticket thing. But once I saw the fest first person and experienced it for, X number of hours in the beautiful afternoon at Olin Park, then it was like, okay, yeah, this is probably worth the ticket line. This
is an event that's, obviously organized by the Madison Homebrewers and Tasters Guild. How many brewers participate every year?
It's somewhere in the hundreds.
Oh my God.
Maybe not multiple hundreds, but I think like 140 or something like that. And you got 1,000 beers or something ridiculous like that.
Okay, dumb wine drinker question.
Okay.
Do beer drinkers spit at a tasting event?
No.
Why not?
Because you're there to drink it. You either drink it or you don't. What you do, however, or at least the smart attendee does, is dump.
Oh.
And especially because you're outdoors. So there are other festivals like Isthmus's Beer and Cheese Fest or Great American Beer Festival out in Denver that are indoors. They're in a big arena. And there'll be buckets everywhere that you can just kind of sploosh into. But the nice thing about Great Taste is that it's outdoors. So my rule of thumb, because I don't want to dump it on someone's foot accidentally or just create a mucky spot, I always aim for the tent stakes because no one's stepping there anyway. And then I figure it's doing the organizers a favor because it makes it easier to pull them out at the end of the day. I don't know. But that's what I shoot for. You want to dump any beer that isn't really making you happy. You have no obligation to drink, but what you do have an obligation just to do as a general human being is not dump it out in front of the person who made it.
Oh, that's a lovely kindness.
Yeah.
That's a very nice thing to do.
Because everyone who's working those tables is a brewer or a brewery employee of some kind. So you don't want to okay, I've had my sip of this. Thanks, and immediately turn around and dump it out at the nearest tent stick.
And this is the Great Taste of the Midwest.
Midwest, correct.
So
yeah.
We're not going to be mean. Come on.
Yeah, if there were California brewers here, I'd dump it right on the table. Just look them straight in the eye.
On your head.
Yeah,
no.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I find really interesting at a tasting event like that, right, where I'm sure a lot of these brewers are bringing out things that they've made specially for it, that they're excited to debut, but I'm a note taker. I'm a tracker. How do you keep track of everything that you've been tasting, or do you not even try?
No, I do try, but it's a nominal effort because I know that my phone's going to get sticky if I try and do it all afternoon. My faculties are going to diminish. I'm pretty sure I'm in a minority of people that tries to really astutely keep track during the event, as opposed to get home and take a nap and then try and remember later. And I see the face you're making. It's a face that isn't transmitted through the podcast medium, but I mean, you and I are of a kind on this, is that we want to pay attention and note take.
I want to know what I had because I mean, we'll go to wine country. I'll do like 5-7 wineries in a day, and that is not unusual. However, my notes are like you will see, and you actually can see my faculties diminishing as I go to the 7th winery of the day, but it's there. So then later when I look and say, why the heck did I buy 4 bottles of that Riesling? I can look back and say, oh.
The difference is, though, you're on your own time when you're doing that. Whereas at the festival, there is definitely the sensation like when you're on the golf course and you see someone teeing off behind you, you're like, oh, crap, now I got to hurry up.
Yeah, okay.
You only have so many hours, A, at the festival, and B, maybe with these beers ever. So there's kind of a sense of, I just got to get this stuff down real quick, or just literally taste it and move on to the next thing and try and remember later.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that when you're doing like a bunch of different wineries, they're going to close, right? So you have to be kind of aware that there is a time limit. But you're right.
You could always go the next day.
Yes,
and
there's
with Great Taste, it's the next year.
So having gone now to Great Taste for several years in a row, I'm sure you're kind of very attuned to the changes and the trends that you're seeing. Like, I feel like sours have been booming. We've talked about that before. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you noticed this year? Things that were exciting to you, things that you're excited to kind of see in the market, any trends that you noticed?
I think there are a lot more brewers that are starting to focus on really old world beers, like old world Germanic and British styles. Like one of my favorite brewers that I really only get to experience during Great Taste weekend is from St. Louis, the Civil Life. And it's all largely British-y sort of old world styles. So, browns, lagers, ales, just really simple, straightforward, adjunct-free kind of beers. No weird flavors, no coffee or cinnamon or raspberries or whatever. Just straightforward beer recipes made really clean, really straightforward to style. And they're great. They're just really good. It's a great brewery. And for people who walk into an event like the Great Taste and sort of get googly-eyed at all the options, that's a great place to start because they're really well made. They're not, corn lagers like the big macro breweries make. They're more like the old world European beers, and they're really good. So you're seeing more places that are doing things like that. They're looking away from all of the crazy ingredients, looking away from sours, looking away from barrel aging, and just doing really down the main street kind of simple old world beers like that. And you got to do them well. Because as the conventional wisdom is, you've got less of a hiding place for flaws. Wood or fruit or coffee or vanilla really can hide a lot of sins in your recipe.
Are beers from the Civil Life available in Madison?
No.
Is there a parallel, something that's similar that people can get around here?
Well, I mean, probably Capital. Wisconsin Brewing Company would be another one, since Kirby's kind of he holds up the classics.
Was there anything that surprised you this year?
There were 2 beers that, both of them have, non-beer ingredients, sort of like culinary ingredients. And they were both on my radar, so I knew I wanted to try them going in, but I was surprised at how good they were sort of at their base. One was from actually they were both Illinois breweries, now I think about it, Right Brain. Right Brain is Illinois, and Corridor is in the Chicago area. And Right Brain I've had before. They do kind of wacky adjunct recipes. They've made a beer where they have put whole cherry pies into the brew, like crust and filling and all, in like a bag, so that they don't gunk up the works. But
okay. So it's sort of like a bouquet garni, but
bit.
instead of like herbs, you have an entire pie. It feels
pies,
like
plural.
Like
yeah.
Gunky and weird.
Well, that's why it's in the bag. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
To keep the solids out, and then at some point they filter it a little bit. But they're really good. They've done fun adjunct stuff like this, and they did just a really simple cream ale with Madagascar vanilla beans, and they used a little bit of corn in the grain bill to sort of flesh it out just a little bit, give it a little bit more body, and they called it Cakewalk, and it's supposed to be like a sort of a vanilla cake-esque.
Was it very aromatic with that vanilla in it?
Ish. It wasn't overdone. That's the thing, is it was really subtle. It was not a 2x4 vanilla over the side of your head. If I hadn't had it on my radar and took a sip of it, I might have missed the vanilla, might not. I don't know. But a friend got the pour of it, and I was like, oh, yeah, that was on my list. Let me try a sip. Tries a sip. And it was just a really solid cream ale with a little bit of vanilla in it. And it's that kind of addition that doesn't have to hide a sin. It's adding a value. And another one from Corridor was actually featured in the Tone.com pre-event write-up on the goofy beer names of the Great Taste of the Midwest. The $100 Yoga Pants from Corridor was actually really good. Made everybody in my group pretty happy. It's a cucumber blonde ale. And again, a really simple base recipe with just a little bit of cucumber. thrown in there. And it was crisp and refreshing, and it was a little cloudy, unfiltered. And, obviously the reference is sort of like spa water, the big jug of water with cucumber slices in it.
I kind of love that.
Yeah, and it was super good. Like there's plenty of cucumber. This event is swimming in cucumber beers because it's that time of year where you've got cucumbers growing. It's refreshing in a hot environment. So there's always like a lot of cucumber kolsch's and cucumber pilsners and things like that.
You mentioned Right Brain. Was there a beer from Right Brain?
Yeah, that was the Cakewalk.
So the Cakewalk was from Right Brain, and the
$100 Yoga Pants was
Corridor.
Corridor. Yeah.
I wonder, like, because of the time of year when this is, do like stouts and porters and some of those like bigger, sort of heavier beers, are they at a disadvantage? Do you
no.
want the less?
No.
Okay.
No. However strident beer people may be about seasonality and the creep of, pumpkin beers coming out in July and August, when it comes to Great Taste in the Midwest or other festivals, there is no seasonality. They want everything. The beer drinker wants to be able to get whatever he or she wants at that festival. So that includes stuff that typically wouldn't be marketed anyway until the colder weather months. But I probably had about 14 or 15 different stouts. All of them wacky, of course. There were very few that didn't have some kind of nutty thing in them. That's just the nature of being at a festival, plus my personal adjunct stout proclivities. There's one particular brewer that I had on my to-do list, Hailstorm, also out of Illinois, actually. And they had about 4 or 5 different variations on their barrel-aged Vlad Russian Imperial Stout. It used to be called Vlad the Impaler, but I think they decided to take the Impaler part out and just call it Vlad. Family-friendly beer. But they had a maple one, and they had a vanilla one. They had a raspberry one. They just had a straight-up barrel-aged one because normally they make it not with the barrel.
One of the things that happens with Distill America is when these new spirits make a debut at Distill America, they often will show up then in the Madison market, which is exciting. Are there any examples of that from Great Taste?
Yeah, a lot of the brewers will bring stuff. Shorts Brewing out of Michigan is pretty well known for always bringing some stuff in their truck to drop off to some friendly liquor stores for retail sale. There is no retail sale at the event. They only pour draft, and nothing leaves the area. Every time you leave, you have to turn your glass upside down. They make sure you don't even go with a full glass out to the parking lot. They pride themselves on having the most legal beer festival possible.
It seems like a smart way to get to 31 years.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like they're just so, they have like one employee, or it's certainly less than a handful. It's all volunteers that put it on. And it's really remarkable how polished of an event it is for being a bunch of homebrewers initially anyway. Obviously now people that maybe are beer professionals otherwise, but do this as, an unpaid part of their day-to-day work.
So you brought some beer here today.
Yeah, speaking of wacky stouts.
Yeah, what'd you bring?
So this one just hit shelves for this year's batch. It's from Central Waters, so Wisconsin brewer up in Amherst. It's one of their Brewers Reserve series beers, which are all barrel-aged, bourbon barrel-aged. And this one is Cassian Sunset. So it is, on the label, it reads stout aged in used oak bourbon barrels with coffee, vanilla beans, and cinnamon added.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So used oak, just while you're opening it, used oak bourbon barrels. Bourbon barrels have the char inside, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but if they've been used already, how much of that char comes through? Is it a lot?
Not much. You get a little bit of that sort of toasty element to it.
Oh, it's so dark.
Little taster glass. I've got one taster glass from the Great American Beer Festival and one from Three Floyds Brewing Company Dark Lord Day because I came, again, not for the radio medium, but I came in costume. I have cargo shorts and a Three Floyds Dark Lord Day t-shirt, which is anyone who's ever been to a beer festival has seen me or someone who looks just like me except with maybe more beard about 25 times over. This is the beer festival outfit.
Beer festival costume.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's sort of close to what I typically wear, but
All right.
I try to not wear too much of a beer shirt. All right, cheers.
Cheers. Okay. It's really dark. It's just a very dark color. It's not as like aromatic as I was expecting based on the description.
Yeah. It has
It's also cold. And
variations. Yeah, and it's been on a little ice pack on my way over here today, but it is a little warmer than fridge temp, so.
Ooh, it's almost chocolatey.
Yeah. All those dark roasted malts bring a lot of their own flavors. And if you didn't want to add adjuncts, you can play a lot with those sort of implied flavors of the base ingredients in the beer. So this batch just came out, but the brewery has kind of apologized for making a fairly small batch this year.
Oh. They
had some kind of production issue. They've been a little cagey about it, but that's okay. So they released some of this in the Madison market. You may still be able to find it in shelves, but it's kind of one of the local chase beers. It's one that people grab as soon as it hits the market.
And it's Central Waters.
Central Waters Cassian Sunset.
Cassian Sunset. Cassia.
IAN. Yeah, so cassia, the scientific name for cinnamon.
This is pretty great. So what's interesting to me about this is that it really does, like that barrel, I mean, it has that wine quality that I like.
Yeah.
And there were several, I went to a Malthouse event and I was tasting a bunch of sours from Oso, which is up in that same area.
Sure.
Oso, I think
just hang a right when you get to, or stay on the highway as opposed to hanging a right when you go to Amherst.
Yeah. So it's in Plover, I think.
Correct.
And I was trying a bunch of their sours, including like a rhubarb barbarella, and we tried one that had aronia berries and one that was cranberry. We tried a bunch of different things, and there were a couple that were very like Venus, tasted like wine.
Right.
But this has some of those qualities too, and I think it has to do with like the balance of acidity to like the body, like those, like how the acidity is kind of handled in the balance of the of the beer.
With stouts, where you find that balance and what can kind of mock the sensation of acidity is the level of carbonation, because you can get some stouts that are either by virtue of being really thick or undercarbonated or a little bit of both. Don't do a whole lot. They like land on your palate, and it's just like motor oil. So this one is not. And people nationally who talk about beer will both praise and gently razz Central Waters frequently for not having enough body, like not being thick enough. All those unfermented sugars just kind of are not present. And that's the thing that kind of exemplifies Wisconsin beers and upper Midwestern beers is that sense of balance. Same thing with New Glarus. You're not going to find a really heavy beer. And the same thing it's true with Central Waters. So the base beer they use for this is different than for some of their other fancy stouts. One of the longest lines at this year's Great Taste was for Central Waters when they tapped what they alleged to be the last of the Ardea Insignis, which was their super duper fancy barrel-aged stout that they released last year. It was, a $40 bottle. It was a lottery, that kind of thing. And it was aged for 2 years in really old barrels. And they brought it to tap at the event. It wasn't poured out of bottles. It was one of the last kegs of it. And the base beer for Ardea is different than the base beer for this. So there's a different palate sensation on the two. So one's a little more luxurious. But the nice thing about these Brewers Reserve beers, for as nutty as their adjuncts can be sometimes, is that they're really solid at the heart of them. They're not overly boozy. They're not overly thick. They deliver a lot of flavor on their own and from the barrel. And then the adjuncts come in and they're like, oh yeah, there's some cinnamon in there.
The thing about that you just said about, being overly boozy, being overly thick, kind of landing on your palate like motor oil, that's what I really can't, I just can't get behind. Like, It's not something I can ever really, because I'm so interested in acid and minerality and those kind of qualities, and I've really moved that way, like in my wine drinking palate as well.
Sure.
And so, like the kind of flavors that I gravitate toward in my wine and my coffee, it's that brightness and it's the kind of the balance with the acidity. Where like I understand that not everybody wants to drink straight lemon juice like I do, but I feel like having that presence, like it can kind of decrease your perception of the sugars.
Yeah.
As well, if you have more of that acid. So I think that's a great example of something where you wouldn't necessarily expect it to have that kind of brightness,
right?
But it's there and it's great.
Mm-hmm. And anytime you see bourbon barrel written sideways on the bottle for Central Waters, that's one you can definitely buy. Right now they have this one and the bourbon barrel Scotch Ale out on shelves. At various points in the year, they'll do a cherry stout, they'll do their regular bourbon barrel aged stout, they'll do a barley wine. But this is just a really solid series. Everyone outside of Wisconsin that doesn't get distribution of Central Waters buys these when they come into town. This is one of the beers that, if it had made it through this last week, would have been gone by the end of this weekend. That's one thing that our bottle shops are notorious for, is being picked clean by visitors from out of state of all the cool New Glarus stuff or Oso stuff or Central Waters stuff that doesn't get far outside of Wisconsin.
So you had a good day for Great Taste? Had a successful
The weather couldn't
one?
have been better. I ran into a lot of friends. I gave away a boatload of Limburger sandwiches. It's the whole thing.
The whole deal.
Yeah, it was really just a perfect day.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for recapping.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers. This has been an archival episode of The Corner Table. Editing help is offered by Eric Lawrenson, and our music was composed by Patrick Christians. Subscribe to The Corner Table wherever you get your podcasts, and find ongoing food and drink news at captimes.com. We'll be back with more episodes in August, and until then, have a great summer.